basics. All right. Now, these you'll find directly under the Tax Administration Act, but I want to run through and explain to you exactly what these things mean. All right. Inspection, verification, or audit. All right. How does this work? SARS may select a person for inspection, verification, or audit on a basis of any consideration relevant for the proper Administration and Tax Act, including on a random or risk assessment basis. All right. Now, we always get asked the question, why do we get audited? Well, it says random or risk assessment. What is a risk assessment? Every single time you hand in that 201 return, every single time you hand in your 501 return, which is your reconciliation, every time you go back and make an adjustment to your 201, every time you go back and make an adjustment to your 501 on your IP5 certificates, what are you doing? You're increasing your risk. Okay, so basically internally in that perspective, what SARS has, and this is what we need to understand, when you register for employees tax, when you register for VAT, they ask you to put in which sector you are in, correct? Especially for SDL. So we know now you're an accounting firm. So this accounting firm in normal, what happens in December to accounting firms? They normally close up. And it's normally when you make payment of your bonuses, correct? So if everybody in the market space is making bonus payments in December, that means theoretically all your 201 returns for the 7th of January are going to be higher than normal. What happens if yours is not? You'll automatically start adding discretionary points. So in other words, that's the way the random aspect comes through from the risk assessment at the end of the day. Are you entitled to ask SARS why they want to audit you? The answer is yes. What they're going to tell you? Well, you were just highlighted, or we decided to, or you happen to have an article in Noseweek about your company last week, so we're coming to see what you're actually up to. You know, that's basically. So SARS can, in terms of that consideration for the relevant purposes of the Act, come and verify whether or not you have done anything that is non-compliant. Are we happy about that? No, but we have to. Okay? At least we understand the basics of where it comes from. Right, then, there's been some new changes which we all need to know. Have any of you had a SARS official come to your offices lately? You haven't seen them whip out their leather little badges. Right? They've now got a badge. Something like the, FBI or something to that effect, but it effectively is a little badge that's got the authorization on. And it's very important that we understand this, because how many times do we have a phone call and it's a SARS official, or we have an email, it's a SARS official. But is that SARS official authorized to actually do what they intend doing at the end of the day? And this is where the rules are. And look, what I'm telling you today, we're not being funny, antagonistic. It is what the law states. You know, so if the law says you have to be authorized to do an audit, you've got to be authorized. If you're not authorized, I'm not going to give you anything. That's the bottom line. All right, so let's look what they say. A senior SARS official, and if you noticed, I put senior in inverted commas. Who's a senior SARS official? Nobody knows. Nobody can give you a list of who a senior SARS official is. So we don't really know who those parties are. I mean, if you look at the cards the individuals will have, they call themselves specialists. Does it mean you're a senior specialist or just a specialist? All right. So this is something that is still a little bit of an issue for everybody, because nobody knows who the senior SARS officials are. But basically, a SARS official may grant a SARS official written authorization to conduct field audits or criminal investigations. So that tells us they've got a piece of paper saying, I, Steve Krause, with ID number are hereby authorized by the Commissioner or the senior SARS official to conduct field audits or criminal investigations. Next, when a SARS official exercises a power or duty under the Tax Act, the official must produce the authorization. So when they come to your premises for the audit that has now been planned, because they've sent you an email, notification of audit and everything else, what's the first thing you ask for? Where's your authorization? If the person does not have the authorization, goodbye. Why? Because the Act says, if the official does not produce the authorization, a member of the public is entitled to assume that the SARS official is not a SARS official so authorized. Why am I saying this? Because you can have a person. How many of you have received a SARS email saying you've got a refund due to you? Please log in here and go get the money, it's done, eh? So if that can happen, how do you know it's actually a SARS official that sent you the letter in the first place? Have you ever tried to contact the number on the SARS official's email? What's going to happen? One or two things. Number one, the voicemail box that you have reached is full. Or the person does not subscribe to the voicemail box, all right? So we need to be careful. So if that person does arrive at your premises and they do not have an authorization letter, sorry, we're not going to proceed. Is that going to irritate them? Am I concerned about them being irritated or not? No, the point being is, the law says you must do it. So please bring your authorization letter. Do you understand this simple little thing here? Because running through an audit, let me tell you this, if that person has failed to produce the authorization letter and you have asked them for that, and they continue with that audit, we can, in terms of that, go back and have that whole assessment reviewed. Because from an administrative perspective, in terms of POJA and the rest, being, did they follow protocol? The answer is no. So that person was not authorized to conduct a field audit, thereby meaning the findings that that person has reached is null and void. Because you're not authorized to do it, even though it might be correct. Are you following the principle of what I'm trying to get at? We must follow what we need to do. So no authorization. So in other words, if I cannot whip out my badge with my letter, I can't help you. Are you going to do it? Yes or no? So, okay, no questions. All right, so now we've got the next little step. And I'm just giving you, all this is going to come to accumulation of what we need to follow in process. All right, now, keeping taxpayer informed. This is a new thing that was brought in. In the past, SARS used to come along, ask you for your payroll questionnaire, complete that, or conduct an audit, and you never hear from them. All right, correct? So now what has been put in place, Tax Administration Act says SARS must report back to you. Okay, but there's a couple of loopholes within this that we need to understand. The first thing, a SARS official involved in or responsible for an audit in a manner prescribed by the Commissioner provide the taxpayer with a report indicating the stage of completion of the audit. All right, that's when you get progress reports. Have any of you received those already? On clients of yours? None. So you've got an audit going, you don't get a progress report. You're supposed to be getting it every 30 days. Unless the following. Upon conclusion of the audit or criminal investigation and where the audit was inconclusive, SARS must inform the taxpayer accordingly within 21 days. You're all going, no, they don't do this. Sorry? Well, let's see if they give you one. They only give you a completion letter when they want to raise an assessment. But if it's inconclusive, they don't tell you anything. You see, now from a client perspective, how many of you have clients that are undergoing these audits and are sitting in a position where your client says, have you heard anything? And your answer is, no. What you can now do is, in terms of Section 42, write them a letter saying, we have not heard from you in the last month, 6 months, 2 months, whatever it might be. Can you please give us an update on that audit? Why is it important to get the update? Because then you at least know there's finalization or there's no finalization at the end of the day. Because otherwise that thing stays open, and that's the problem we have. They start an audit in 2012, you have one team coming in collecting documentation, 2 years down the line, somebody else comes along, a new party, and saying, by the way, that audit that was still running, we want to reopen and go through the documentation, which is incorrect. Okay, so you were fully within your rights to say, excuse me, we've now reached a period of non-discussion, non-communication. Can you please give us a status? Are you following? Questions?
I'm concerned. You give an assessment, and then they say, we want documents for verification. You send them in, and then they say, you're now on audit. We want documents for verification. You send exactly the same documents. And then eventually they say, okay, we'll pay you out. But nobody's authorized. It's all done on e-filing.
Okay. I'm so happy you raised that word e-filing. Okay? I personally, and myself, and e-filing, in the aspect of what has been done in terms of legislation versus what is running through e-filing, is a total problem. Okay? Because firstly, what would happen, and we can use an income tax assessment or VAT assessment, because PYE, anything like that, you'll get this thing saying to you, you've been selected for audit. Please supply us documentation. What documents? Now we've got to thumb suck which documents you're actually referring to. That's my first issue that I have, and we'll get to that later again, where SARS is erring in that aspect. Because it cannot be vague, it has to be specific. So I want to check your output tax, I want to check your reconciliation, that's what's supposed to be. Then the second thing is, it says there, please upload. It may not be bigger than 2 megabytes. Okay, so then we'll play around and try and break down the stuff into smaller things, and we send it off. And then we don't hear anything, next minute we get an assessment. An additional assessment. Why? Do we have a letter of findings? Do we have reasons for it? The answer is no. Now this is something that we're going to address through this course, because that is totally against the Constitution in that aspect, against SARS Charter, against the protocol, against everything that is in the Tax Administration Act, and against the new rules in terms of objections that were launched in July 2014. They have to give you adequate reasons. Before they get to your audit aspect, they have to tell you what they're specifically looking at and not being vague. All right, now, I know I'm telling you things that you know, but we're going to run through this and how we need to treat that. Because the problem is now also something that is, I know, totally off the page. But if you look at the new rules in terms of ADR, electronic submission, unless that person has acknowledged receipt, is not deemed to have been received by SARS. Now you know what that means. You go into your e-filing, you do an objection, because now you've seen, you worked out, finally figured out by going, trying, okay, let's think this way and that way, find out what actually was deemed wrong by them, and you lodge your objection on e-filing. If nobody acknowledges that, it is not deemed to have been received. It's the same as you send an email to SARS, you know, let's say you're dealing with a specific auditor now, you're not dealing through e-filing, and you send documentation or you send your request for suspension of payment or whatever it might be. If that person does not acknowledge that they have received it, a red receipt doesn't count. A thing coming back saying the mailbox is full doesn't count. An out of office reply doesn't count. So now we're back to the old days where we effectively have to make a copy, go down to revenue officers and get them to stamp it. Right, so that's the new rules. We're going to run through a whole bunch of these changes that are coming through. And why are we raising it? Because obviously you need to be aware of it. I mean, that's the biggest thing. But I will get back to your point now on all that running through this process, okay? So as I said, inconclusive, they have to tell us within 21 days. Then they say the audit identified potential adjustments of a material nature. SARS must, within 21 days or a further period based on the complexities of the audit, provide a taxpayer with the outcome of the audit, including grounds for an assessment. Okay? So if they say there's anything wrong there, they have to, within 21 days, provide you the grounds. Do they do that? Huh? They just issue it. So we need to have adequate reasons for it. Now, this is what the law states to us. Okay? It is not been done. That means we, as the practitioners, need to go back to SARS when we get it and say, excuse me, in terms of Section 42, I require reasons why you've raised this assessment. Now, can you do that on e-filing? The answer is no. You're going to have to do it through your local office. What is that adequate reasons? Actually, in terms of the new provisions for ADR, within 30 days, you know, objection period is 30 days. Okay, from the date of assessment, no longer from the first to the second of period. So you've got 30 days. Within those 30 days, you are entitled to request adequate reasons, which then extends your objection period by another 45 days, within which SARS has to come back to you with adequate reasons. Okay. Right, so that's there. We need to look at it. We need to make sure that we ask those questions. Is everyone following me, or am I boring you yet? Huh? Nobody's complaining on the webinar yet. Must I smile and wave again? Okay, however, if a SARS official has a reasonable belief, now this is where the problem comes in, and this is a scapegoat aspect. However, if a senior SARS official has a reasonable belief that issuing a progress report, or if identified potential adjustments of material would impede or prejudice the purpose, progress, or outcome of the audit, then no correspondence needs to be sent to the taxpayer. Now that's nice. Because it means I don't have to send you anything, because anything I'm going to send you, you're going to come back with me with a whole letter explaining why and all the rest of it. So it's going to impede my audit, because now I'm busy answering your questions. Now, especially if they see my name or my friend Mr. Daniel Erasmus, then they know there's another 20-page letter coming asking why, please explain and do all the rest, okay? But that means we are still entitled to ask SARS, what is the progress? And if they come back then and say to us, sorry, we can't divulge what the progress is due to this specific scenario, at least we know where we stand. Because that's the stage then you need to start worrying, okay? Then best you get your client in and say, excuse me, no holiday for you. You need to keep bucks aside because we're probably going to have a fight on our hands soon. All right. But it's keeping you informed, client informed. Most clients get highly frustrated when they hear nothing from SARS. And they get tired of you saying, but SARS hasn't said anything. It's on e-filing, they haven't come back to us. We understand it, but at least this way around, you can at least be a little more proactive in that process. Okay? All right, SARS may, under the circumstances above, issue an assessment, and such grounds of assessment must be provided to the taxpayer within 21 days of an assessment. Does it say excluding e-filing? No. So every assessment that is raised as an additional assessment, or as a recon assessment, those funny things where your account is clear today, and tomorrow you pull a statement, oops, here's a little recon assessment. Recon assessment for what? What did you reconcile? Your cash flow short and you needed more money or something, What's the grounds for it? There we are. They have to provide us with those specific grounds. Right, now let me give you a practical example here. 99% of the time when you get that little recon assessment, you can't go out to the High Court and get a court order to set aside SARS's assessment based on their actions. But that is what you're entitled to do. If SARS raises an assessment without providing you adequate reasons, there is nothing preventing you from going to the High Court and effectively get the court to issue a notice to SARS to withdraw their assessment on the basis of administrative practice. Does it cost you money? Yeah, it's about 100K. But if you've got a 20 million rand assessment, you want to do it because the pay now, argue later principle. So that's why we need to follow these protocols at the end of the day to ensure that we have some kind of base to actually get into a situation where we are dealing with SARS in an amicable manner based on rules. We have to follow rules, you follow the rules, and we work in that format where ultimately your client is going to benefit. Okay. Yes, sir.
Sorry, what is the definition of an assessment?
Okay. That is as vague as, in terms that there's no definition of an assessment per se. Okay? It is a notice showing a new liability. So in other words, if SARS sends you a letter which says this is deemed to be a notice of assessment, at the end of the day you now owe this amount. That is an assessment. When they do the little recon assessments and things where you don't get paperwork, and they call them journals and things like that you see all over the account and nobody can work out where it's coming from, those are not seen as assessments. But the same principle applies. Anything that you change, because bearing in mind on PAYE and VAT, it's a self-assessment system. So in other words, when you hand in your 201, or your VAT 201, EMP 201 at the end of the day, you are making a self-assessment declaration. So any change that SARS makes to what you have put in place is then deemed to be an assessment. And we are entitled then to say, please, we require within 21 days the reasons why you have altered our account, or you have raised this, or we've received this in the post. It still constitutes an assessment. So anything that you have the right to effectively object to. Okay. Yes, you've got a question from the webinar. Sorry? I can't hear you. Oh, yes, okay, sorry. Okay. Right, we will repeat the questions for the people on the webinar as an answer. But I do have for you, and I'll give it to you later, the right wording.